Hello friends, in this video we will learn more deeply about the JVM architecture in Java and its components. So we know that Java is platform independent, which means once compiled you can execute the program on any platform. So who does this for us? So it's the JVM that makes Java platform independent. So Java Virtual Machine is an isolated environment created by abstracting resources from a physical machine and acts as a runtime engine to run Java applications. JVM is an environment that enables a machine to run Java programs. It is part of Java runtime environment. The Java compiler compiles the Java file into .class file and then that file is given to JVM which loads and executes the class file. Each machine has or can have different JVM. However, the output they produce after execution of bytecode, that is the compiled Java file, is same across all operating systems. Without the JVM, you can't run a Java application. So we say that Java is platform independent, but is JVM platform independent or dependent? So JVM is not platform independent. Java Virtual Machine provides the environment to execute the Java file. So at the end, it depends on your kernel and it differs from machine to machine. The JVM is used to both translate the bytecode in the machine language for a particular machine and execute the generated machine language instructions as well. So moving on to the next slide. So this is a basic diagram of architecture of JVM. As shown in this diagram, the JVM is divided into three main subsystems: class loader subsystem, runtime data area, that is JVM memory, and execution engine. We will look into this one by one. So class loader. Java's dynamic class loading functionality is handled by class loader subsystem. It loads, links, and initializes the class file when it refers to a class for the first time, that is at runtime. So loading. This component handles the loading of .class file from hardware system into the JVM memory and stores the binary data in the method areas. The binary data can be fully qualified class name, immediate parent class name, information about methods, variables, structures, etc. After loading the class file, JVM creates an object of type class to represent this file in heap memory. So basically, classes will be loaded by this component. There are three types of class loader: bootstrap class loader, extension class loader, and application class loader. So let us look at them one by one. Whenever the virtual machine comes across a class, it will check whether the specified .class file is loaded or not. If the file is already loaded in the method area, then JVM will consider that class. If not, JVM requests the class loader subsystem to load that class. The class loader subsystem passes the request to the application class loader first, which in turn delegates the request to the extension class loader, and the extension class loader will again delegate this request to the bootstrap class loader. So now the bootstrap class loader will search this class in the bootstrap class path, that is rt.jar. If found, the corresponding class file is loaded. If not, the bootstrap class loader delegates the request to the extension class loader. This will then search the class in the extension path, that is jdk/jre/lib/extension path. If found, the corresponding class file is loaded, or else the extension class loader will again delegate this request to the application class loader, which will now check the class in the application class path. If the class is found, it is loaded; otherwise, we will get a class not found exception in runtime. So this exception indicates that the class was not found in the class path. One more exception that we can get while loading class is no class def found error. This exception also indicates that JVM looked in its internal class definition data for the definition of a class and it did not find it. To more clarify that, usually this exception indicates that we previously attempted to load a class from the class path but it failed for some reason, and now we are again trying to use that class. The earlier failures could be a class not found exception, or an exception initialization error or any problem. Let us see how we can get no class def found error. So this is a sample class. We have created this class and we have intentionally written this code so that it will fail at runtime. And as you can see, we have this main method and, and we are trying to create two objects of the same class, one at line number 7 and one at line number 12. So let us execute this program and see what happens. So as you can see, we have got an exception in initialization error at line number 7 because when the when the JVM tried to first load this class, it got this exception at line number 18, which was caught by our try catch block. And then again, when we tried to instantiate this class, it gave us a no class def found error because JVM tried to look in its internal class definition data structure for the definition of this class and it did not find it. So it threw a no class def found error. So as now we have learned what is loading, let's move on to the next topic, which is linking. This is divided into three stages: verify, prepare and resolve. So in verify, it ensures the correctness of .class file. That is, it checks whether the file is properly formatted or not and is generated by a valid compiler. If verification fails, we will get a runtime exception, that is java.lang.verify error. Next stage is prepare. For all static variables, memory will be allocated in this stage and will be assigned with the default values. So string will get null, int will get 0, etc. Next stage is resolve. It is a process of replacing symbolic references from the type with direct references. It is done by searching into the method area to locate the referenced entity. So the next stage in class loading is the initialization stage. This is the final phase of class loading. Here, all static variables will be assigned with the original values and the static block will be executed. This process is done in a synchronized way as JVM is multi-threaded and some thread may try to initiate the same class or interface at the same time. So as we are done with the class loader, let's move on to the runtime data area. So the runtime data area is divided into 5 major components. Method area. This component holds the class level data of each class file, such as metadata, constant runtime pool, static variables, the code for the methods, etc. There is only one method area per JVM and is shared among all the classes. The memory allocated to this area is by default allocated by the JVM or can be increased as per the computation needs. So the string variable and the code inside these two methods will be stored in the method area. If the method area is not available to satisfy our memory allocation request, the JVM throws an out of memory error. Next is heap area. All the objects and the corresponding instance variables and arrays will be stored here. There is also one heap area per JVM. Since the method and heap area share memory for multiple threads, data stored in is not thread safe. We can use -xms and -xmx JVM option to define the startup size and maximum size of heap memory. Next is stack. Java stack memory is used for the execution of thread. Stack memory is always referenced in LIFO, that is last in first out order. Whenever method is invoked, a new block is created in the stack memory for the method to hold the local primitive values and reference to other objects in the method. As soon as the method ends, the block becomes unused and becomes unavailable for the next method. We can use -XSS to define the stack memory size. Let's go through the steps of the execution of this program. As soon as we run the program, it loads all the runtime classes into the heap space. When the main method is found at line 9, Java runtime creates stack memory to be used by main method thread. We are creating primitive local variable at line number 4. So it's created and stored in the stack memory of main method. Since we are creating object at line number 5, it's created in heap memory and stack memory contains the reference for it. A similar process occurs when we create memory object in the 6th line. Now when we call the foo method on 7th line, a block in the top of stack is created to be used by the foo method. Since Java is passed by value, a new reference to object is created in the foo stack block in the 9th line. A string is created in the 10th line. It goes in the string pool area and a reference is created in the foo stack space for it. Foo method is terminated in the 11th line. And at this time, memory block allocated for foo in stacks becomes free. At line number 8, main method terminates and the stack memory created for main method is destroyed. So now let's understand what are PC registers. Each thread will have separate PC registers to hold the address of current executing instruction. Once the instruction is executed, the PC register will be updated with the next instruction. Next is native method stack. This component is written in different language and holds the native method information. If a thread tries to execute native method call, that is, methods written in other languages, a separate native method stack will be created. So this is what we had for runtime data area. Let's move on to the next topic, that is execution engine. So execution engine. The bytecode which is assigned to the runtime data area will be executed by the execution engine. The execution engine reads the bytecode and executes it piece by piece. It has various components, like let's look at them one by one. First is interpreter. So the interpreter reads the bytecode instruction and executes them in a sequential manner. The component runs the application from the command line by accepting a file name argument. The interpreter interprets the bytecode faster but executes slowly. The disadvantage of the interpreter is that when one method is called multiple times, every time a new interpretation is required. So the next component is JIT compiler, that is just-in-time compiler. This neutralizes the disadvantage of interpreter. The execution engine will be using the help of interpreter in converting bytecode, but when it finds the repeated code, it uses the JIT compiler, which compiles the entire bytecode and changes into a native code. This native code will be used directly for repeated method calls, which thus reduces the total time needed for compilation. The compiler in this component refers to a translator which converts the JVM instruction set to the OS specific instruction set. Next is intermediate code generator. This component produces intermediate code. Code optimizer is responsible for optimizing the intermediate code generated in the previous step. So the next component is target code generator. This is responsible for generating machine code or native code. Profiler, a special component responsible for finding hotspots, that is when the method is called multiple times or not. So this is used by just-in-time compiler. Next is garbage collector. So this collects and removes unreferenced objects. Garbage collection can be triggered by calling system.jc, but the execution is not guaranteed. Garbage collection of JVM collects the objects that are created and no longer referenced. So next is JNI, that is Java Native Interface. Java native interface will be interactive with the native method libraries and provide the native libraries required for the execution engine. So these were all the components of the execution engine. Let's go back to the main diagram again. So we learned what is class loader, what is runtime data area, and what is the execution engine. So hope you liked this video. If you have any questions, please reach out to me in the comment section. Please like and subscribe for more such videos. Thank you.